Whenever I see a scary thread, it ends up being about ghosts and whatnot. That's not scary. I find real people more strange and eerie than the paranormal. What are your scariest encounters with real people? When I was 18, I worked the evening shift at a convenience store. Over the previous 3 nights, 3 stores from the same chain had been held up at gunpoint in my small city. So my manager had basically been prepping me all week to get robbed. I was, understandably, on edge all night. I was down to the last few hours of my shift and I was finally starting to calm down a little bit when a guy with his hat pulled down low walked in. Came right up to the counter. And started reaching into the inside of his jacket and said, "You know those days when you should have just stayed home? I think this is one of them." Time was moving in slow motion at this point and my heart was beating out of my chest. After what felt like 10 minutes, the guy pulled his wallet out of his jacket and asked for a pack of cigarettes. Anticlimactic. But scary nonetheless. TLDR, almost pooped my pants over a pack of cigarettes. When I was quite young, I was out at the park walking my dog, German Shepherd, when I realized it was getting quite late and I was the only one left in the park. A man dressed in a dark hooded top and a black scarf covering his face jumped the fence that led into the alleyway behind the park and started marching towards me. But he hadn't spotted my dog, who was off sniffing around or doing whatever dogs do. My dog got between us though and there was a kind of standoff for a while. My dog was really tense and growling with his hackles raised. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if my dog was going to attack the man, so I just kind of froze. After a while the man backed away, jumped back over the fence and ran away down the alley. I put my dog back on his lead and went home. But he was still tense the whole way back. I was a little freaked out. But perhaps not as afraid as I should have been. Looking back on it now, I didn't know what that man wanted. Or what he was doing there. Or what would have happened if my dog wasn't there with me. There would have been no reason for him to go into that park by himself and come towards me like that. I shudder to think about it. I think if the man had made a move towards me, my dog would have attacked him. The time my high school sweetheart's father found out I took his daughter's virginity. He took me for a drive to an empty field to have a chat. He's a good father and she is an only child. I thought I was dead. My sister's bedroom was on the 2nd floor. All of a sudden she screamed and said she saw a hand on her window. We thought she was having a nightmare. Told her to go back to bed. Next morning we found a ladder up against her house by her window. Edit. Haha. I see people are freaked. It was the 2nd floor. It was normal house. I don't know if that helps or hurts. But the top of the ladder reached it. Also it happened in 1987. So you can relax a little. I work in a Middle Eastern grocery store in one of the reddest states. When my son was an infant I would take him with me to work most days. We get a lot of soldiers that have spent time overseas looking for some of the good food they had there. One day this soldier comes in and he's just nice as can be. Then he sees my son and he starts talking to him in a cutie baby voice saying how cute he is. Then out of nowhere, and in the same cutie voice, he says to my son, "Oh, you're so cute. I just wanna gouge your little eyes out." It caught me way off guard. I just laughed nervously and picked my son up and walked in the back. I have to. When I was around 12, a neighbor had a party where I met a girl my age. My mom was happy to see me making friends, so we head to my house to play games. My dog was a sweet lab who had never been angry or growled ever. This girl walks up to him to pet him. And he immediately growls and barks. And eventually cowers close to me. I couldn't believe it. But even by 12 I believed you don't just ignore a dog's intuition. So I take note of the sign, but we go play and then go for a walk. Not 10 minutes into the conversation and this girl is an obvious sociopath. I realized what I and the dog had felt about her. She was empty and fake. In very visceral way. She starts talking about rape. Not in a maybe she was abused way. In a doesn't that sound interesting, but how do the logistics work kind of way. She specifically wondered how you pay someone while holding a knife to their neck. Her parents invited me to spend the night at her house. I declined. Several years ago I had to spend the night in a psych ward. I couldn't sleep because of this woman that was banging her head against the wall while screaming. My older brother and I were playing in a cemetery in a small Texas town. The cemetery sat next to some railroad tracks which led into the black section of town. For those not in the know, tons of small southern towns are still de facto segregated. It's a huge cemetery and there was no one around. Then we heard little pops. Pop, 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 and pieces of the headstones began flying off around us. We looked toward the railroad tracks and there was an old black man shooting at us with a rifle. I'm a DJ in a local bar. Met many weird and wonderful people in my time. But one stands out in particular. Her name is Alice. And she lives in her own Wonderland 24/7. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure she's harmless. She's always happy and dances like she's auditioning for a new workout DVD, but she's the kind of person you don't want to make eye contact with. Creepiest moment with Alice had to be the one night I was working. Had the headphones on. Doing what I do and was aware of someone standing to the right of me. Not dancing. Instantly got the feeling that you get when you know someone is staring at you. You just have to look back. So I did. What I saw was Alice. Staring right at me with the strangest smile on her face. I say smile, but it wasn't a nice look. Teeth and gums in full view with a crazy look in the eyes. WTF was my initial reaction. Stuck the headphones on again and continued what I was doing. And Alice continued what she was doing too. After a good couple minutes, I removed the headphones and asked, anything in particular I can help you with? You want a request played or something? Her reply will stay with me for the rest of my life. No. I'm good. Just showing you my teeth. Copy pasta from my own thread similar to this. My friend is a female named Mystery, notorally, and Mystery gets her first car last year. Mystery takes it on her first drive alone to McDonald's. Afterwards Mystery drives a few hours to her best friend's house, who moved away months ago upstate. Halfway through the drive someone taps her shoulder from the back of the car and asks her if her name is Mystery. She slams on the brakes and gets out of the car. And like 3 cars stop with her. And the guy gets out and jumps off the like 4-foot bridge they were on and is not seen again. It is our opinion that he got in when she went to McDonald's. But he could have gotten in when her parents put it in the garage. I was once going back to my dorm, which is off campus, by bus. The bus doesn't go directly to the dorm, so I have to walk a half mile to get home. One day, I was coming home late, maybe 10:30 or 11, after hanging out with friends for the afternoon. It was late fall, so it was long dark. I usually walk home with one of my dorm mates, but she had decided to stay home that night, so I was walking alone after dark. Indefinitely not the safest city in the world. I was a little under halfway there when I heard a scream from one of the back alleys. I think it's just a raccoon fight or something, as those sound much like human screams. Until I hear it again. Another scream. Definitely human. I drop my bag behind a trash can and take off running towards the scream. I enter the alley to see a woman lying in the dirt. She turns to look at me. Her face bloodied and swollen. She has a look of pure terror in her eyes. Her eyes widen, and she glances behind me. I catch a flash of new, fresh fear in her eyes. And she screams, "He's right behind you." Without even thinking about it, I grab the lid off the trash can next to me and swing around, smashing a man at least 6 inches taller than me and 70 pounds heavier clean in the head. He falls to the ground, knocked out. I see that an 8-inch knife with a huge blade falls from his hand. I called the cops and stayed with the woman until they arrived. I never saw either the man or the woman again. I take a taxi at night now. I remember when I was younger I was playing hide and seek with my cousins at my grandparents' house. I went into my grandparents' room and hid under the bed. My grandfather had just gotten out of the shower, walked into the room ass naked, and bent down in front of the bed without knowing I was in there. Mentally scarred for life. And he will never know. When I was a youngling, my brother and I went for a walk in the woods behind our new house. We came upon an unfamiliar area and noticed plaster body parts thrown willy-nilly. We kept walking and discovered a mannequin massacre. Dozens of lifelike plaster mannequins in various positions of death and torture. Some with burn marks. Some tied to trees with forks and knives stuck into them. And others hung by their necks from branches 3 stories up. The mannequins were dressed in human clothes and featured detailed facial expressions of pain and terror. In the middle of this WTF clusterfuck were childlike mannequins that had been tied up and blindfolded. Used condoms were everywhere. We left, terrified and wondering who the FCK would do this. This is the reason why I don't take Greyhound buses across country to visit my parents anymore. I got my seat on the bus and was about to fall asleep when a guy dressed in torn up jeans and a see-through mesh shirt sat next to me. I really didn't care at the time, just thought he had horrible fashion sense. The bus made it onto the highway and the guy suddenly starts to shake as if he was coming off drugs. He was probably just cold, but it still aided to freaking me out at the time. Then he starts to mumble something about never again. Don't trust him again. And I'll get her. Let's just say I didn't get any sleep on that bus ride. 2 weeks later I watched the news and saw the same guy. He had, without any type of warning, decapitated the passengers sitting next to him. My first semester at Rutgers, New Brunswick, NJ, I got stuck taking all-night classes and didn't get out until about 10:00. I then would walk from the College Ave campus to the NJ transit station. Not too far a walk, but it starts to feel seedy in that area and I wasn't 100% sure where I was going. So here I am already a little leery when all of a sudden I hear someone barking at me. That's right, barking. I look up and discover a man is up in the tree barking and growling down at me as I walk by. I was freaked out but afraid if I ran it might provoke him to follow, so I speed walked to the corner, then ran across the street and didn't stop till I was at the train platform. My cousin and I went out drinking in Ohio. I was drunk. So I step outside for some fresh air from the crowded bar. There was this guy outside who was kind of lanky and having a smoke. Feeling disoriented, I sat on the bench to rest my head a bit and the guy came up to me saying, "Guy, dude, you ain't ever gonna make it in the real world. If I had my way, I'd take you back home with me to my tool shed where I'd tie you to the wall and torture you to death." Me. Well, that sounds lovely. Hold on. I'm really interested in that. But I've got to take a piss real quick. I went back into the bar. Went into the men's restroom and locked the door until my head cleared up so I could tell my cousin that we should leave. I was walking to the parkade on campus late at night after studying from finals. As I am walking to the pedestrian overpass to the parkade, I notice a girl, maybe 17-19, walking alone in her bare feet. It strikes me as odd. But I keep walking until she sits on a curb and puts her head in her lap. So I walk over to her and say, "Excuse me. Is everything alright?" As soon as I speak, she gets straight up and starts walking towards me, but looking past me with a glazed look. By this time I don't know what to do, so I just stand there while she walks directly by me, almost touching shoulders with me, all the while looking directly ahead. Then she walked all the way down the road out of sight. It was the weirdest thing I have ever seen. One day I was welcomed into a group to conduct an experience with scent relations. On the first day we all got to smell freshly baked cookies and had to write down what the smell reminded us of. Grandma's house or Christmas. The next few days went with this, including cookies, ham and bacon. The next day we were blindfolded as usual and led into the room, and we all were told to write what we think. I thought I was in a new home. It smelled wonderful. They then told me to remove my blindfold and I saw I was in a disgusting, dank, dirty apartment. I was stuck in there with no response for what seemed like an eternity. FCK February's man. Token, not me but someone I know. Bear with me. My mother used to work in real estate when she was younger. Once, she was asked to go out, alone, to a creepy and strange house in the middle of the country with a seeking buyer, an equally creepy and strange man. My mom kept getting a bad feeling from this guy. And he seemed nervous and kept jumping around. Eventually he asked her to go down and see the cavernous and finished basement with her. Very calmly. She responds, "Oh. No. I'll just wait up here while you check it out." Double quote. The more she thought about that afterwards, the creepier it got. And when she told her boss about it, he said that under no circumstances were you supposed to go out to a house like that alone with any customer. She thinks that maybe he wanted to hurt someone and didn't really know how. Edit. Grammar. I drove my sister to get sushi in a not so good part of town one time. We were in the car about to get out. And I reached down to get my wallet. I looked back up and the creepiest, most strung out looking human being I've ever seen in my life had his face against her window, licking the glass. He then pulled his sleeve up to show us some scars on his forearm. Face against the glass the entire time. I don't eat there anymore. Colon. Open bracket. A complete stranger approached me in Hollywood once. He was homeless looking but tall. Super tall, at least 6'6". Bald. With an absurdly protruding belly, like a water belly, and super long arms. Like a wax figurine that started to melt. One of his eyes was clouded white and he was missing a tooth or two. He just walked up to me as I was drinking coffee outside. Stopped inches from my face and said, smiling, "I might kill you tonight," in a low voice before walking off. Crazy bastard. I was once surrounded by a group of 8 teenagers who tried to mug me at a bus stop. I was sucker punched from my right side once. Then twice but didn't fall. I was struck to the back of my head. Then my left. Then my right again until I started to fall. I was grabbed, kneed, and thrown to the ground. I managed to roll to my feet and run. I was worried I was followed. I slept with a golf club next to my bed for the next couple weeks. This story isn't so much scary as it is crazy. But I thought I'd share. One time when I was about 4 and my sister was about 1/2. We were playing in the backyard when all of a sudden there was a huge crash and the phone line went dead. My mom was on the phone at the time. I have the vaguest memory of being terrified. Running inside the house. And seeing a huge crack on the wall. Anyway. Come to find out. Someone had driven their van into our house. Apparently there was a wasp in the car and the driver jumped out of the f-king car without stopping because he was scared of it. And the van careened into our house. I guess the scary part of this story is that most of the time my sister and I played in the driveway with chalk, etc. And it just so happened that this time we were in the backyard. Also the fact that someone drove their car into our house. Here's a picture. http. imgur. joxp0. Not sure if this is what you wanted, but back in college I was walking in a dress and some heels trying to flag down a taxi, relatively late at night and in Chicago, and notice a homeless man walking alone towards me muttering things out loud as if talking to someone else. He looked up as he was getting closer to me and I saw his open hand close up into a fist. I got nervous and reached for my cell. Not knowing really what to do. He stared and kept walking and then stops for a second right behind me and says, "I can't do that. That'll be 5 to 8 years. Stop telling me to do that. FCK it. I'm doing it." I turned around and must have looked wildly scared. He caught my eye and said to something invisible to me, although I don't think to him, "Stop making me hurt people," and then turned around and kept walking. Scariest moments of my life. When I was younger I went with my family to Yosemite. My dad remembers going to the campground bathrooms there and seeing a janitor there who just gave him the chills for some reason. He's a dentist. So he gets to know a lot of people. He has gotten very good at reading them. He says he has run into a few people in his life where he could just tell that something wasn't working correctly upstairs and it freaked him out. I don't mean the people had a mental handicap. I mean the people were cold. They were psychopaths. It doesn't necessarily mean they were serial killers. He could just tell that they couldn't comprehend empathy. When he saw the janitor, he immediately picked up on this. I don't know if he talked to him at all though. Later that year he reads in the newspaper that a serial killer was caught in Yosemite. Sure enough, it was that janitor that he saw. The guy had killed 4 people earlier that year. I believe the guy's name is Cary Stayner. My only heart-stopping incident was when I worked in a bank. They drill into you in training signs to look for during a robbery, how to respond, etc. It was my second week out of training, and I had a guy come in and head straight to my counter. He was this stringy, drifter looking guy, and he was holding something in both hands below my counter. He says to me, "I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to make this a really bad day for you." He then raises his hands from below the counter and drops a green military ammunition box on the counter. My heart was about to go running out of my chest. And the box is still closed. He pops the latch, and out pops change. The fucker had a whole box of unsorted change he wanted to deposit. That was all. My friend's mother was walking home from the train station and became aware that she was being followed by a man. She took all sorts of details and the man continued to follow her for the entire journey. After about 25 minutes she arrived at her house but had the good sense to walk straight past it and continued on to the police station. Once inside she turned round to see the man walk past, stopping to give her an extremely creepy wave. That story terrifies me. I was walking home from work one night around 9 PM. And I was on a side street so there weren't any other people around. There are some bushes along the sidewalk. And as I'm walking by, I hear a rustling noise. Then, suddenly, a homeless guy with crazy eyes jumps out of the bushes onto the sidewalk, right in front of me. He seems just as surprised to see me as I am to see him and we just stare at each other for a few seconds. I can tell he is clearly on some kind of drug because he isn't blinking and he's sort of sniffing the air around me like a dog. I froze and slyly tried to reach into my purse for my mace just in case he tried to attack me. As soon as he saw me reaching into my purse, he made a noise that resembled a wolf howl, leaped back into the bushes and sprinted off through the shrubbery. I still kind of wonder to this day if I encountered a werewolf mid-change. Not entirely scary but very creepy. I used to work as a security guard at Whole Foods in Boston. One day I was doing my usual patrol until a worker at the store came up to me asking for help getting one of the bathroom doors open because it had been locked for about an hour. I went up to the door and started banging on it asking if anyone was in there and if they were hurt or needed help. I heard some rustling around but I heard no voice. So we ended up getting the keys finally and I had opened up the door to what I still can't out of my mind today. An old man, 70ish or so, sitting on the floor of the bathroom naked, jacking off with about 4 chopsticks tied together with rubber bands shoving them into his ass. I guess he was just as shocked as I was when I came barreling in because he's hard of hearing. His friend he came there with was sitting out on the bench waiting for him and had to take him back home to the elderly complex close by. I felt really bad for the guy because he didn't know what was going on and the manager of the store was screaming his lungs out at the guy as he was walking out in front of everyone. I'm not sure I'll ever get the image out of my head, though. Not mine, but happened to my friends a few weeks ago. They were walking down their road on the way to meet a few of us at the cinema. They were talking about some paintings they were part way through and the woman, C, is asking her fiancé what she should add next. He says why not add something abstract like a windmill or a fire extinguisher? And says this as a very rough young chap is cycling past. About 5 minutes later, this guy cycles up from behind, stops in front of them throwing his bike to the floor, storms up to D and yells, "Are you talking about fire extinguishers?" D replies, "Yeah?" And the guy demands to know why. D tells him and the guy looks very confused. He picks up his bike, starts off on his way again and yells, "Well, stop it," over his shoulder. Of course we all had a good laugh but it could have gone a whole different way. My worry is I only live a few doors down from them. Must never mention fire extinguishers near cyclists. I live and work in a high-rise apartment building. Once, I got into the elevator and this Asian kid I had never seen before also got in. It's very unusual for me to not know someone in this building. First of all, And since he was alone, he could not have been a guest since we have strict rules about keeping guests with you at all times. He was normal until the doors closed. But then he began to prowl wordlessly around me, in a circle, watching me the whole time. The only way that I could think to describe it was as if he were a ghost who was curious about people who were still living, and didn't think that he could be seen. He got right up into my face, then drew back quickly and kept prowling, never looking away. When the elevator got to my floor, I ran to my room and locked the door. Never saw him again. What the hell? Not the scared one, but the scary one. When I was in high school, I performed in a few regional vocal performances, upstate New York, and we practiced in around the school auditorium where we were performing for the few days beforehand. One year, the power cut out in the auditorium where a lot of the performers were lounged while waiting for whatever was next. I was in the back middle of the stage, so I had really good projection where I was. The moment the power cut out, shrieks of terror filled the room. And for whatever reason I found this hilarious, and unintentionally started this booming, evil laugh. The screams only intensified in this pitch black room with this obviously crazy person hiding around every possible corner, who apparently shut off the power and was biding his time to take them away to their doom. I was almost kidnapped while walking around at 7 AM. Two vans began to circle around the blocks while I was walking home. This continued for about 5 minutes until one of them stopped behind me. One of the men stared me down. He was white, in his 50s with long white hair and beard. I heard the man stop behind me and open his door. I ran away as fast as I could. That was a very close call. I was with my cousins playing in the woods circa age 7 and this guy in all black just sprints right past us. 2 minutes later about 15 policemen come and question us about the guy. I wonder what would have happened if he had thought he lost the police and we were alone there with him. I was a bit of a problem child in high school, so I would skip classes by hiding behind the gym. We had tennis courts back there and a little gazebo I would sit in. Sometimes I would go for walks past these. There was a creek, a bit of bushland and sort of a nature trail of sorts. I was walking and I came out of the bush and saw a big red brick building. It was walled off and across a largish patch of grass away from me. And that's when I heard it. Someone was screaming non-stop. I was sort of edging around the building looking at, terrified. And it went on for at least 20 minutes. I left before it had stopped. I went back there a few times and there was always screaming. High pitched. I don't know how someone could maintain it that long without going hoarse. A theory me and my friends came up with was that it was a psych clinic and they were doing some kind of therapy that involved screaming. I got close to the gate once, was just a normal gate, and I could just see a man sitting on a chair near a door reading a newspaper. So I googled it. It's a mental health hospital for elderly patients. My ex-girlfriend, I am also a female, and I rented a house from a co-worker in a less than desirable area of town a few years ago. We had several crazy, but harmless neighbors except the one right next door. We innocently enough thought nothing of leaving the blinds open on the side of the house that faced him. We didn't realize he even lived there at the time. One morning I was home alone and walked past a window in just my bra and underwear. I glanced towards the direction of his house and he was standing in just his underwear staring directly at me. I freaked out, dropped to the floor and literally crawled away. His bedroom window was no more than 40 feet from our house. We started shutting all of the blinds. But every time we would look out them or go outside he would stand with his face pushed up against the window and stare at us while making a weird chattery sound with his teeth. I am pretty sure he spent a good majority of his day staring out the window in hopes of catching a glimpse of one of us. It was terrifying. And the police said they couldn't do anything since he was in his own home. I think I have pictures of him somewhere, and will post them if anyone is interested. My grandpa and I were at a rest stop once when we were driving somewhere. My grandpa gets out of the truck and goes to walk into the bathroom. Off to the side, there was this shady looking fellow smoking a cigarette. When my grandpa had his back turned, The guy came at him with a knife. I tried to like bang on the window or something to alert my grandpa. He didn't hear me. And then when he neared the wall of the rest stop, he whipped around, cuffed the guy on the ear, and slammed him against the wall, simultaneously pulling out his pistol. He put the pistol under the man's chin and said, "Ish to you not, come on punk. Try something. Make my F-King day." Clint Eastwood badassery right there. The man ran off when my grandpa let go of him. Then, my grandpa calmly took a piss, and we were on our way. That's the day I learned he is a badass. And if you want to know why it was scary, it's because looking at my grandpa, he looks frail and old. And I didn't know he had a carry piece on him. This'll probably get buried, but whatever. When I was maybe 7 or 8, I went to a local Burger King with my mom. I was impatient to eat, so I went to go play around in one of those plastic playground things that are about 20 feet high. There were no other kids in it, so I just started to climb to the highest point. A businessman, I assume due to the white shirt and tie, looked at me climbing up, calmly put his burger down, and proceeded to climb up after me. He didn't say anything as he did it. I was old enough to think this was weird, and had flashbacks of our school counselor talking to the class about getting kidnapped and such. I rushed to the slide and ran straight to my mom. Gave her a giant hug. I didn't tell her about the incident until later. Being at my friend's for a sleepover. Friend's mom asked us to take out the garbage. So me, my friend and his brother grab the 2 bags and go to drop it. Also in our area we had 2 dump bins that the whole building used. Anyway, we start walking towards the bins and me and the older brother get ahead of the younger brother by a few meters. As we get close to the bins, roughly 5 meters away, we then take notice of the shirtless guy that was walking away from the bins. Me and the friend laugh at a joke when this shirtless guy turns around and pulls out a long and thin chain from his pocket. Starts swinging it and walking towards us, very much with intention of hitting us. We drop the bags of garbage on the spot and start gunning. The younger brother, who wasn't aware, got so scared and confused he tripped. Meanwhile me and older brother have at least put a good 20-meter space between us and the psycho shirtless chain swinger. I didn't look, but friend says when he fell the guy walked past him and then he ran. We looked out from the window when we got back in and he put our garbage bags in the bin. Weirdest tea ever. My friend and I were building a tree house in the woods behind my house. And by tree house, I mean nailing some boards to a tree to use as steps. That is as far as our tree house plans got. But I digress. There we were, nailing cut up 2 X4s to the tree, and we heard a clanking metal sound. And turned to look. And on an old 10-speed bike is this tall lanky fellow who is as white as a ghost, for lack of a better term. He sees us and stops, turns his bike around and bolts off. It freaked us out and we came tearing out of the woods, leaving the tools and everything behind. We went back later to get them, like we were medics in a war zone going in for someone wounded, running and ducking behind stumps and trees, grabbing the goods and bolting. When my wife and I traveled to America, we stopped off in Vegas. The entire trip was a blur, so this story will be a little vague. We were on a bus, for some reason, and a lady had just sat down near us. She started talking to us about where we were from, what we had seen, tourist small talk. Then she asked where we were staying, for how long. Weird questions. So we thought, FCK, we're out, and got off the bus. She said this was her stop too. We managed to get out a little ahead of her and melded into the crowd. Snuck up some overpass or something, sorry, vague, and hid in a nook for a while, thinking we were clear and giggling about the slightly odd lady. We had a look down to the street. The strange lady is on the road, searching desperately, sort of hunched over and scowling. We had just enough time to think, this is a little peculiar, when she spots us, breaks into a sprint, hurdles a concrete roadwork barrier and pelts up to where we are. We pissed the FCK off out of there, and hid in a corner in a casino for a couple of hours. Someone who broke into a few people's houses, tied them up and raped them, works at the ticket barriers at the nearest big train station. He's just been finally caught. 33 years after the attacks. Me and my dad used to say hi to him because he was friendly. I just found out about this today. I'm fairly creeped out. I encountered two people in my school's library elevator at different times of the day. The backstory is a woman died in one of the library elevators a couple weeks before. Don't worry, it's not a ghost story, just minor relevant info. Anyway, I never go to the library, but I decided to go this day to study for finals. I get in the elevator with some Asian girl. Before the elevator lifted off, it stuttered and paused for a couple seconds. We both look at each other. And she says, "These elevators are so scary. Some lady died here a couple of weeks ago." I nod and replied, "Yeah, I heard." Then she gets overly anxious and morbid and kept talking about how dangerous it is to be in there and about death and shit. I could not be happier to get out of that weird awkward situation. So later I get back into the elevator when I'll even think of that girl again and giggle to myself while another awkward Asian kid gets in with me. Doesn't really acknowledge me at first, then elevator begins to go down and this F-king kid gets right up behind me. His head is practically over my shoulder and says quietly, "Do you like horror films?" I look at him and he was dead serious and wide-eyed. I take a huge sidestep away from him and say, "Oh no." He just mutters, "Oh." Stares at the floor, then starts to get all shifty-eyed for some freaky reason. TLDR, F-king take the stairs now. Back when I was growing up in Russia, we had a abandoned school close to where I lived. So one day me and my friends decided it would be a good idea to explore it. Oh, how bad this idea turned out to be. We entered through one of the broken windows and proceeded to venture on. When we discovered that the school was being used by either homeless or some other kids, I hears voices in the hallways. Being the brave 13-year-old I was, I decided to check it out. What came to my horror? That there were 5-7 naked men having an orgy. I started running and told my buddies to run. When I looked behind me, I saw a guy chasing us with a wrench in frenzy. The fear went through my body and I never ran faster in my life before. Thankfully we all made it out and never returned. Later that place was entirely boarded up and destroyed by the police or by Russian militia. I got tons of stories. My shrink says, "My childhood is an entire phase of trauma." One story that is a party favorite is when I was about 11. Walking home from school. A small group of gang members were walking towards my direction. This was around 1993 in Sokol. Anyway, a random man, homeless I believe, walked up to the gang for some reason. In a blink of an eye the man was stabbed in the neck. The gang ran off. I stood paralyzed with fear and couldn't believe what I saw. A woman came running to his aid from a nearby store. I watched as the lady held the man as he died. I'll never forget the face he had as he was dying. Very un-Hollywood. When I was little, some guys broke into my parents' garage. My bedroom was right next to the door of the garage and my face was right next to the unlocked window. I was like 3 or 4 and was getting trained to not piss my sheets because I have a sleeping disorder where pretty much nothing can wake you up. So I am chilling in my Power Ranger sheets when this hand covers my mouth. At first I thought it was my dad because he used to sneak into my room at night when he got home from work and give me a hug or leave a new toy or something. But then I realized this hand is coming from outside my window. This guy is leaning into my open window with his hand over my mouth and a knife at my throat and is trying to drag me out this window. Needless to say, being 4, I pissed my pants, which luckily was hooked up to an alarm that is set to go off when I peed to wake my ass up. Only this guy thought it was a house alarm or something and bailed. TLDR, wetting the bed saved my life maybe.